Here we are at Shelburne Cemetery. Scattered throughout this cemetery are the headstones without any seeming connection on the inscriptions that are on them. As a genealogist, your first thought might be they were a neighbor or maybe a distant relative that they took pity on. If you look closer, I think you'll find that they belong to a quiet group of people who contributed an incredible amount to Dufferin County. Separated from their families as young children and sent here to help on farms or in homes, they are what we call the British home children of Dufferin County. Between 1869 and the late 1930s, over 100,000 children emigrated here to Canada from the United Kingdom to be used as indentured farm labourers and domestic servants. Believed by the Canadian families to be truly orphans, they were really only about 12% of them that were. Over 50 different organizations sent these children here to Canada. Some of them are still operating as charities as we know now. Bernardo's Agency, Warriors, and the Salvation Army. These children became known as home children, or to some, the Bernardo Boys. We know of at least 212 home children that stayed for a short time here in Dufferin County. While some of these children were definitely treated poorly, overworked, abused, or harmed by the family that they lived with, others were accepted into the families that they were working for and still stayed in Dufferin County after their indentured part with home children was completed. Here in Shelburne Cemetery, we have numerous examples of home children that have stayed in Dufferin County and were buried here. Some of those were adopted into their respective families. Those would be Lizzie Armstrong and Percy Spenceley. Born Elizabeth Smith in Marylebone, England, her mother died in 1904, and she, along with her sister Alice, were handed over to the care of the Dr. Bernardo's Agency. She and her sister left England, came to Canada on August 3, 1905, landing in Montreal. There they were transferred to the Hazelbury Receiving Home in Peterborough. Here, Elizabeth and Alice were separated, as was oft to happen. Alice went to Leamington, and Elizabeth came here to the James Armstrong farm in Violet Hill. There she worked as a domestic servant and moved in with the family to Whittington, Amaranth Township. After a short while, she was adopted by the family and took on the last name Armstrong. She would stay with the family following the death of Mrs. Armstrong, and when Mr. Armstrong moved into Shelburne, she moved with him to continue with his care as he aged. She never married, continued to stay in Shelburne, and became a beloved Aunt Lizzie to many in the town. Percy Spenceley, son of Eliza and George Spenceley of Yorkshire, England, was sent to Canada through the Dr. Bernardo's Agency at the age of 7 years old. He was placed with Mr. and Mrs. Richard Keyes of Melanchthon Township on their family farm. Here he worked as an indentured farm laborer, but was educated, unlike many, at SS No. 1 Silk School, which is actually just up the road behind me. Richard and his wife Jane married in their late 40s, and they never had any children of their own. They called Percy their adopted son. When Percy enlisted in World War I and was discharged, he returned back here to the family farm in Melanchthon. Percy and his wife Nellie Graham, another home child, remained on the farm here. When his father died in 1920, he buried him here at Shelburne Cemetery. When Nellie and Percy died, they are buried beside his adopted mom and dad, Richard and Jane Keyes. For family history researchers, it could be confusing to have two different names on the same headstone that don't seem to immediately be related. But don't forget that cemeteries are a time capsule of Canadian history, and for over 4 decades, British children came to live with farm families here in Canada. Do not discount the possibility of these children being buried in the same graves as those that they lived with. And don't forget, they could have been adopted into those families as well. There's always a story beyond what's written on the headstone.